My parents kicked me out because of my brother's toxic ex-girlfriend, but years later they ask for help, and I say I'll do it only if they do something very hard with my brother. Parents have high expectations for their children. Mine were no different. They had many expectations of me as the eldest son, while my brother could do no wrong. And let me tell you, I noticed it right away. I didn't know how to explain it when I was younger, but I knew something was different in the way they treated my brother and me. As I grew older, I could understand more about the differences in how they treated us, but what I never understood was why. I think one reason this happened was because my brother was my parents' favorite. Come on, we've all thought at least once that our parents might have a favorite. If I had asked my parents directly, they would have told me it wasn't true. Of course, they didn't have a favorite. They loved both Jason and me equally. But just by observing how they treated us, you could tell Jason was their favorite. So here's my current problem and the reason I'm telling this story. I cut off all contact with my parents for years, but they've come back into my life after doing something terrible. Other family members say I should forgive and forget, while I'm just angry. Forgiving and forgetting isn't easy, and that's why I'm here. First, I should back up a bit and explain some context so you can understand how on earth I ended up where I am now with, well, my parents. I was born first, and then, a year and a half later, my brother Jason was born. Of the two of us, I was the planned one, while my brother was a surprise baby. Stereotypically, siblings so close in age are supposed to be close, but my brother and I were not. The problem was that my parents made it clear they preferred him. For some reason, he could get away with anything, even a crime, while I couldn't do anything wrong without being punished. It was strange that I, the planned child, was treated worse than my brother. Imagine how confusing it is for a child who only wants love and acceptance from their parents. I was always the one meeting my parents' high expectations, getting better grades, doing all my chores, participating in all school activities, and never getting into trouble. I met all my parents' requirements, always got top marks, and finished every task assigned to me. When I was old enough, I swapped extracurricular programs for a part-time job, but always showed up on time. Most importantly, I never got into trouble, not even once. The same couldn't be said about my brother. He was a mess from the moment my parents brought him home from the hospital. You see, my brother got bad grades, did his chores half-heartedly, and always got into some sort of mischief. He didn't get in trouble with the law or anything like that, but my brother was always on the edge of crossing the line. It made me angry because, no matter how hard I tried, my parents just wouldn't let up with me. Every time I made a small mistake, something that didn't happen very often, they would yell at me and punish me. Well, the punishment usually involved being grounded at home, which infuriated me. The little free time I had, I wanted to spend with my friends. Did Jason ever get in trouble? Well, sort of. My parents would punish him, in quotes, but it could hardly be called punishment. All I could do was watch in fury as my anger boiled inside me. Now you can see why I no longer have contact with my parents. By the time I was 18, I hated how they treated me and couldn't understand why they couldn't hold my brother and me to the same standards. I mean, it wasn't fair. There came a point in my teenage years when I had to realize that this was just how things were, and nothing I did would change that. My parents were never going to change. So the easiest thing I could do was keep my head down and not anger them. All I had to do was make it through high school. Officially, I would graduate, get a scholarship, and move on with my life. But you're probably wondering, what was the incident that made me decide to cut my parents off for good? It happened during my senior year of high school. I remember that when I got to school that day, everyone was looking at me and whispering behind my back. It was making me incredibly nervous. Finally, I pulled one of my friends aside to ask what the hell was going on. There was a rumor going around the school. It had to do with Missy, my brother's ex-girlfriend. She and my brother had broken up about a month before the incident. I had no idea why they broke up, and to be honest, I didn't care. It was my brother's business, not mine. Missy was spreading rumors about the two of us. She was saying that we had been together about 3 months before, when my brother was away at camp. She claimed she was 3 months pregnant and that the baby was mine. That couldn't have been further from the truth. For starters, I was a virgin at the time. And two, Missy wasn't my type. Even if Missy had been the last woman on earth, I would have never been with her. She started spreading this rumor, so I had to constantly deny it to everyone at school. No one could understand why she would lie about something like that, and neither could I. It didn't make sense. Why invent such a lie just to make my brother jealous? The rumors eventually reached my parents. I got home that day, and my brother accused me of being a terrible brother, a bad person, and that I would be an irresponsible father. Missy had told my brother that she was sorry, and that I had told her to get rid of the baby because I didn't want to be involved. I never said anything like that, of course. They didn't want to listen to me, and for more than a week they harassed me, telling me that I had to take responsibility for what I had done. I told them there was nothing to take responsibility for because I hadn't done anything. It got to the point where they kicked me out of the house. One day, I came home to find 2 bags with my things packed outside, with nowhere to go. I went to the neighbors and called my aunt. She lived in the next town over and had always been my safe place. When I finally got in touch with her, she was shocked that my parents had done that, and she took me in. It was hard living with my aunt because I had to change schools, but I finished high school and got ready for college. Meanwhile, Missy kept spreading rumors. I managed to confront her and told her that when the baby was born, I would take a DNA test to prove that I wasn't the father. Of course, she didn't want me to take the DNA test because that baby wasn't mine. First, because we had never been together, and second, because the baby was my brother's. And my brother suspected it and could have stopped all of this. But since he didn't want to take responsibility himself, Missy used me to get revenge on him, making him look like the fool in front of the school, while dragging me into the whole mess. Do you think my parents apologized? No, of course not. They prefer to be on good terms with Missy, who was going to give them a grandchild, rather than apologize to me, the son they never cared about. At that point, I decided it was time to cut my family out of my life. I went to college, enrolling in journalism, something I had always wanted to do. Fast forward 10 years to the present. I'm now 28 years old and have a successful career. I've been recognized for my work on national television. Maybe that's where my parents saw me because shortly after a recent TV appearance, they decided to write me a letter. Yes, a letter. A small part of me hoped they were reaching out to apologize, or at least to congratulate me on everything I had achieved. But no, that wasn't it. My parents were contacting me because they needed help. Well, my brother needed help. According to my parents, my brother Jason was sick, couldn't pay his medical bills, and was currently in the hospital, trying to recover while worrying about the costs. My parents had tried to pay what they could, but their income was limited. Most of their money went toward the mortgage, which they were still paying off. I can't believe my parents are reaching out to me because my brother needs help. This just shows that my brother will always be considered their number one. What do you think I should do? Update 1. All the responses I've received from you have been overwhelming. I never thought so many people would reply, but it's nice to know there are people out there who care about me. And all of you are just strangers. I guess I've forgotten what it's like to receive that from my own family because, being honest, I don't expect it from anyone. Well, here's the update. I agreed to meet with my parents to see what the hell they wanted, about a week after they first contacted me. What they had to say left me stunned, and honestly, made me really angry. They told me that my brother really needed the money for his medical bills. So I insisted, trying to find out what exactly was wrong with him. My mom was a bit reluctant, and my dad wouldn't even look me in the eye. I kept pushing, threatening to leave if they didn't tell me. I was ready to walk out of their lives, this time for good. This made my dad finally speak up. It turns out my brother had been in a car accident. Accidents happen, but I felt there was more to the story. When I pressed further, my mom admitted that the reason my brother had the accident was because he had been drinking. He was driving drunk. Yes, the accident was caused by my brother from the start. He wasn't sick or in a critical condition, as I initially thought. I would have helped if the accident hadn't been his fault, like, for example, if he had been hit by a drunk driver, sure. But that's not what happened. Guys, my brother caused the accident by crashing his car from drinking too much. He was going to survive, but he'd be in the hospital recovering for a while. And to top it off, he couldn't pay child support for his son, my nephew. So my parents wanted help with that. They wanted to make sure their grandchild was well taken care of. To be honest, I barely knew my nephew. I'd seen him a few times when he was little, but I hadn't seen him in years, except for in photos. Sometimes I'd look him up online just to see how he was doing. The kid isn't at fault for what's happening, between my parents and me. He was just born into a messy family situation. His mother wasn't much better. You know how quick she was to drag me into her crazy plan. I never got a real apology from Jason's ex-girlfriend for trying to pin her pregnancy on me. Not that an apology would have helped much, but I think it would have made me feel a little better. Eventually, I stood up and left. They yelled at me, but all I did was turn around and tell them I wasn't going to help. No amount of yelling is going to change my mind. They can scream at me until they're blue in the face. My brother got himself into this mess. He can get himself out. I've accomplished something for myself without any help from my dad, mom, or brother. They've only made my life harder. Cutting them off was the best thing I've ever done, because as long as I had them in my life, they were just holding me back and keeping me from reaching my full potential. They keep trying to contact me, sending other family members to tell me I need to help them. They're all blocked. There's no way I'm helping them, but I also can't just let them get away with all of this so easily. Mom and Dad need to learn a lesson. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet, but I'm going to sit down and think it over. If anyone has any ideas on how I can get back at them, please leave me a suggestion. I'm willing to try anything at this point if it means making my parents squirm. Maybe it sounds bad, but they deserve it after what they've done to me. Update 2. I've been doing a lot of thinking, especially after reading your comments. Some people suggested I try saving face by agreeing to help my parents, but giving them an ultimatum they could never accept. I spent a lot of time thinking about what that could be. Finally, I decided to tell my parents that the only way I would give them money would be if they cut off all ties with my brother. I'd give them the money to help my nephew and cover my brother's bills this time, but after that, they would have to get rid of him. I mean, he was still living with my parents, so they would have to kick him out for good. I decided to tell them this about a week after our initial conversation. It was enough time for me to plan my strategy and figure out exactly what I wanted to do. They probably thought I was taking my time to see how I could gather the money for them, but I wasn't going to give them any money. I was just setting them up for a joke. The expression on my parents' faces dropped. My dad started saying I was crazy and that I was asking them for something that wasn't fair. But I stood firm, determined to follow through with this. I told them that was the only way I would help them. If they didn't agree, they could kiss the money goodbye. My parents left furious after that, and I tried not to laugh until they were gone. Honestly, it went exactly as I had hoped. At this point, I don't think I'll have to deal with my parents anymore. I have an amazing career and have been casually seeing someone for the past few months. I don't think I'll ever see my parents again, but anything could happen. If there are more updates, I'll be back here to let you all know right away. Update 3. Here I am, back with another update. I hadn't heard from my parents for a long 2 weeks. I figured I'd never hear from them again, or if I did, it would be to yell at me, calling me a terrible son or something along those lines. I was convinced they wouldn't reach out again, until they did. To my surprise, they called. I was expecting them to keep begging me for money. Then, when they realized I wasn't going to change my mind, I thought they'd lash out at me, telling me I was selfish. But, well, they didn't do any of that. Do you know what they did? They ended up telling me they had done it, or rather, that they were going to do it. After thinking it over, they spoke with my brother and told him they would help him one last time. But once he was out of the hospital, he would have to find somewhere else to live. Under no circumstances would he be allowed to keep living with them. To prove it to me, they recorded the phone conversation they had with him. He wasn't happy at all. My brother hurled a lot of insults and curses, all aimed at me. It almost made me want to laugh, but I held back so I wouldn't ruin the situation in that moment. I told my parents they would get the money, but that I needed a few days to gather it. Please don't be mad at me. Some of you are probably yelling at your computer and furiously typing comments right now, but I never actually planned to help them. The thing is, when I told my parents I'd help, I wasn't telling the truth. You see, I never thought my parents would actually go through with cutting off my brother. I was completely shocked when they told me they were going to do it. In my entire life, they had never done anything like this for me. My brother had always been the favorite. He was the center of their attention, and I was always the one pushed aside, with impossible expectations to meet. It's not fair that they did this to me, so now I'm going to play with them a bit. Now that things have shifted a little, I'm adjusting my plan just a bit. Either way, my parents aren't going to get the money. I'll be back here to make sure I update you all on what's going on with my family. I promise you won't be disappointed in me. Under no circumstances will I change my mind. My parents and my brother won't get a single penny from me. So, yeah, there will probably be at least one more update coming soon. Stay tuned. Update 4. My parents and I sat down the other day, about 3 days after our last conversation. I met them at a coffee shop. It's always better to meet people in public, so everyone is on equal ground. We had a somewhat civilized chat for a while, which was surprising. I couldn't believe they were actually interested in talking to me about something related to my life. Usually, they'd always want to go straight to talking about my brother. Eventually, they got to the point and asked me about the money. I smiled and pulled out a check. I wrote it right there in front of them. They took it, with smiles on their faces, but what they didn't know was that the only thing written on the check was a big "Go to hell." Yes, I literally wrote "Go to hell" on the check. Childish? Probably. But it felt amazing to write that, and you know what? It was even better to see the expressions on their faces when they opened it and read it. It wasn't a sum of money, but words I had wanted to tell them for a very long time. Once the shock wore off, they asked me what was going on. I just smiled smugly and told them I wasn't going to give them the money. This whole time, I had just been playing them. If they had ever tried to reach out and apologize to me in the past, maybe things would have been a little different. But that's not how things went down. I got up and left. I haven't heard from them since that meeting. They've tried to contact me, and so has my brother, but I'm done. The only family I'm going to talk to is my aunt, because I care about her. Other than her, I have my friends and my girlfriend. It's hard to say what's going to happen to my parents and my brother, but you know what? I don't care. I've cut them out of my life for good, and they won't be a part of it, past, present, or future. Honestly, I used to feel sad about this, but now I'm thrilled that I don't have to deal with them for even one more second. Update 5. I know many of you think I was the villain for playing with my parents' emotions. I get it. Looking from the outside, it might seem like I was cruel. But before anyone else judges me, it's important to understand the truth behind all of this. My parents never apologized to me, not even once, for everything that happened in the past. They never wanted a sincere reconciliation. They just wanted my money. To them, that was the important thing. They never saw me as a son they loved or valued. And now, with what I've learned, it's clear they tried to manipulate me. Only this time it didn't go as they expected. The recording they gave me, the one where they supposedly had a confrontation with my brother, was a well-planned act. My parents never intended to cut ties with him. Why would they? He's always been their favorite. What they wanted was to make me believe they were willing to sacrifice something for me, when in reality, they just wanted the money. Their plan was simple: get my check, and then go back to cutting me out of their lives like I was just an ATM. This doesn't surprise me, because it's not like my parents, after having a favorite child for my whole life, were suddenly going to start loving and caring for me overnight. That's not how things work, and deep down, I always knew it. But the most interesting part of all this is how I found out the truth behind the charade. I received an unexpected call. It was from Missy. Yes, the same Missy who almost ruined my life years ago with her lies. I had no reason to listen to her, nor to trust a single word that came out of her mouth. But something about her tone, or maybe just my own curiosity, made me hesitate before hanging up. "It's important," she said. "You'll want to hear this." I decided to give her a few minutes, thinking that if what she had to say was stupid or a lie, I'd just hang up and get on with my day. I wasn't expecting an apology, not by a long shot. Missy told me something that, at first, left me shocked, but after thinking it over, made perfect sense. She said that my brother owed her a lot of money in child support, and that she had been pressuring him to pay up, even while he was still recovering in the hospital. He promised her that everything would be sorted out soon, that she didn't need to worry. He told her to wait a little longer because, according to my brother, I was going to give my parents money, and with that, he'd be able to pay off his debt to her. Furious about the lack of payments and seeing that my brother and parents' plan had failed, Missy decided to spill everything to me as a form of revenge. According to Missy, my brother had confessed the entire plan that he and my parents had orchestrated. The phone call recording, my parents' act of telling him they were going to kick him out, it was all part of a setup to make me believe they were really willing to cut ties with him. Once they got the money from me, my brother would continue living with them, and everything would go back to the way it was before. It was a dirty plan, and hearing about it made me feel sick. Now, to be honest, I have mixed feelings. Part of me wonders if what Missy told me is entirely true. After all, this is the same woman who was willing to drag my name through the mud, lie, and make me out to be the father of her child just to get back at my brother. Could she be lying again, trying to manipulate the situation in her own way? It's a possibility. Missy is not someone I trust, not by any stretch. But on the other hand, what she told me fits perfectly with what I already know about my parents. They were never going to cut ties with my brother. It's always been about him. I was just a tool in their plan, a source of money. I still don't know what to think entirely. I don't know if everything Missy said is the truth, or if it's just her twisted version of events. But what I do know is that I made the right decision in cutting them off. My parents and my brother are so wrapped up in their own lies and manipulations that there's no way I can have a healthy relationship with them. It's better this way, from a distance. At least this way, I don't have to deal with their games anymore. So this is my final update. It may not be the ending many of you expected, but for me, it's the closure I needed. And that, at the end of the day, is all that really matters.